Hey guys, Nick here. I wanted to go over some things that I've noticed how people damage their rods. And these are all things that I used to do when I first started out fishing. We all don't know this stuff. We have to learn along the way. We all start off with some fiberglass rod, some ugly stick we got at Walmart, or our grandma or grandpa passed down the lines. And we used to be rough with the rods, leaning them up against stucco walls, sticking them in corners, bending the tips over. So I want to go over some things if you purchase a high-end rod that you should pay attention to. High-end rods are sensitive. They're not like your ugly sticks that can bend and you can stick it in a garbage disposal and smash it down and grind it around and the rod's going to survive. No, in regards to bass fishing, we're using light composite graphite rods that are very sensitive, need to bend a certain way to where you can feel that fish fart on the dang thing if you want to, so to speak. So let me go over this right off the bat. So when people say parabolic, meaning a rod having an even bend, okay, if I push down on the tip of the rod right there, you'll start to see the bend distribute itself throughout the rod. So anytime I grab at some point in the rod, I'm interfering with that distribution of power, its ability to bend. Therefore, I'm affecting the rod negatively. So one of the very first things I'm going to cover is I see people bringing up fish next to the boat, and they reel up the fish a foot or two from the tip of the rod, and they grab the rod up here and try to lift the fish up. That, if your rod didn't break, trust me, you put stress fractures in there or you got extremely lucky. When you're lifting a fish into the boat, you either want to have someone net them, or you want to grab in near the back of the rod right here and leave it out and then bring the fish towards you. You always want to have about as much line out equal to the length of the rod. You can just grab the rod, pull it over your head, and bring the fish towards you. That way you're still holding down here, you're allowing the rod to bend freely, you're not stress fracturing the tip. If you want to boat flip a fish, and I'll take this, drop that headbanger, new rocker head bait I got on there, out, and I'll show you. So let's say we have a fish next to the boat, and I want to flip them in the boat. I grab here, I have almost about the length of what you just seen come off of the hook keeper right there. And then I'm going to put my hand under here, and I want to make sure the rod's at about 9 o'clock, and I'm going to lift them up and drop them right there. Or lift them up and bring them to my toes. What you're going to notice is that rod angle's never going over 11 o'clock. If I'm dragging them in, I'm bringing the rod back, and I'm not bringing the rod up like that. Once you put the rod up, you're forcing nothing but the tip of the rod to bend. Therefore, it's not distributing the weight, so you're stress fracturing the tip once again. This is when you'll hear me say, oh, that's a negative angle, the rod's at a negative angle. Negative means your tip's starting to point towards the base end of your rod, causing stress fractures and could cause that rod to easily break. Now here's a common one. Oh, here's my hook keeper right here. Oh, it's only a couple more inches to there. Let me pull the rod tip down and get it around that hook keeper. We are pulling the rod tip directly towards the butt end of our rod. We are now forcing that tip over at a negative angle. Never do that. Open your clutch or your spool if it's a spinning reel, bring it down to the hook keeper and put a very light amount of tension on there to where the tip of the rod is not bending. You're just fastening the line of hair. Then grab your line and twist it a couple times around the rod like so, and you'll see that the rod tip is not bent over. You're not fracturing or stressing out the tip of that rod whatsoever. Easy to store, easy to not get tangled, the correct way to do it. All right, you got your bait out. Your buddy says, let's go to the next spot. You're in a hurry, you get it back. Oh, your bait's like this. I'm just gonna hook it to a guide and we're gonna drive down the lake. Look at the barb on the back of that big old hook right there. If you put that inside a guide, guides on high-end rods are also high-end. This is a Stix reaction stick. These are high-end Fuji guides in here. You put a big barb going through there and it's shaking down the lake, and next thing you know, you're getting line fray. Well, what happened is you scuffed up the inside of a high-end guide, an insert like that, just by being in a hurry and putting it there. Another thing you don't want to do, reeling up to the tip of the rod like that. Guys will reel up to the tip of the rod, and then when it's bouncing down the lake, you're smacking, and therefore you're causing damage to that tip of the guide. You're over flexing the tip of that rod. don't do it, guys. Always drop it right back down to that line keeper and repeat the last step like I showed you right here. Only takes you a couple more seconds to do it, and it's a clean system. All right, guys, you ever notice in a bass boat, we're seeing the guys up here, they're working the trolling motor, and the rods are pointed backwards. That's not just for easily being able to pick it up. Yeah, that is correct, but it's also the base of your rod right here. This is called the working deck, your working area. If you happen to step on a rod, you're in the thicker part of your rod. Having that rod backwards is not only a hassle, but it's much more fragile on the tip. So when you have your rods in the working area, you'll see a lot of bass fishermen tilt them up on side to make space. One thing that's critical is I want you to follow me to the tip of these rods. I'm going to step down here. One thing that's critical is you always want to have your tips touching the gunwale or gunnel, whatever you want to call it. It's actually gunwale, but we call it gunnel. I think it just became an abbreviation. Make sure your tips are always touching there. If you have a co-angler or a netter in the midst of the chaos, they can easily come up and step up there. Make sure your butts are close here. Turn your rod sideways. Put those tips up against the side. If you're a bank fisherman, do not lay your rods on the ground. Find a bush and lay your rod into the bush. Something that's gonna have some cushion, some bystander could be going by, not pay attention to your gear and step on it. Now, another thing that's really critical when you're in a boat is that it's reel up, okay? On a spinning rod, a lot of the time you don't have that option. It'll start to lay towards the guides. But what easily happens is if your rod is down and someone steps on your rod has to put the pressure against those guides, and usually what'll happen is you'll notice one of your guides on your rod is bent one direction. If somebody stepped on your rod or you, and the rod chose to shift because the guide smashed and failed, so now you're gonna have to get your guide and your insert replaced on the rod. So if you do this and someone does happen to step on the thicker end of your rod, at least they're not on a guide and your rod can probably handle it when they go, oops. So hopefully these tips helped you out, guys. If you own a nice rod, I don't care whose rod you own. If you bought a Sticks from my company, I appreciate it. But no matter what rod you own, take care of it. It's going to be better on you. At least you don't have to send it back in for a warranty for whoever you got it from and wait to get a new one. Best of fishing, guys. See you next time.